Hi readers, this is Ms. Puzio, and in today's lesson we are focusing on Module 8, Lesson 3, and our focus question is, what does it take to make a successful invention? So for this lesson, what we are focusing on today is something called central idea, and you've probably heard of central idea before, or sometimes it is known as the main idea. So it connects to today's focus question, which is, what does the author want us to learn from this text? So when we think of central idea or main idea, we're trying to think of the most important idea the author wants us to learn from the text. So our lesson objective for this lesson is to recognize the central idea in a text, to identify supporting evidence for the central ideas, to evaluate details to determine key ideas that support the central ideas. So we are going to think about what is the central idea, and at this point you should have already read or at least done one full read of Timeless Thomas, How Thomas Edison Changed Our Lives by Jean Beretta, and then you're going to engage in some independent reading so that you can find the central idea in one of your own passages. So as you continue reading Timeless Thomas, we are going to think about the central idea of this text. And we want to think about, what does Jean Beretta want us to learn about Thomas Edison? So when we're doing central or main idea, you can find the central or main idea of the whole passage. You can find the central or main idea of just certain paragraphs or sections. So first, let's think about, what is a central idea? A central idea or a main idea is what the text is mostly about. We have to think about what the author wants us to learn. And you have to remember to pay attention to the text and graphic features. So if you look at this anchor chart here and you look at the table, you think of the central idea as the top of the table, and then the legs underneath are the supporting details. And there's a few ways to help us figure out the main idea. We can look at headings. We can look at pictures, we look at the title, we look at the first and the last sentence of the paragraphs, and repeated words or ideas. So that's going to help us figure out the central idea. So we really want to think about, what does Jean Beretta want us to learn about Thomas Edison and his successful inventions? So before we try to find the central or main idea of the passage or sections in the passage, first we're going to review finding the central or main idea of some photographs, just so that we can get used to the term and just so we can get used to finding connecting ideas, so that if we are struggling with central or main idea, then we can use this to support you. So what you're looking at right here is something called a tree map, and a tree map helps you organize your ideas. So what I've done is I've put 3 pictures here that I want you to look at. And similar to when you're reading a passage, you need to think about, how are these ideas connected? What is the author trying to get me to think about? And what is the big idea that the author is trying to get me to learn? So if you look at these 3 pictures right here, what do you notice? What do you wonder? And what connections can you make in between them? If you can pick an idea that is repeated throughout all of these pictures, what would you say? I see a bus, so what do you know about buses? I see an airplane, so what do you know about airplanes? And I see a car, so you have to think about, what do you know about cars? So if you want to pause and think about this for a second, you can. So basically from these pictures, what I was trying to get you to think is how these 3 pictures represent, and I'm going to put the main idea here of, or the central idea of these 3 pictures are, there are many different ways to travel. So that would be the central idea of these photographs. There are many different ways to travel. And these pictures below would be the supporting details, proving that there are many different ways to travel. That's the big idea. We have the bus, we have the airplane, we have a car. So that's what we have to try to start thinking about when we're reading in a passage. What are the things that the author is trying to get me to learn? And what are the connected ideas that are standing out to me? So let's try it with some other pictures. So I have 3 pictures here, and they're all connected in some way. How do you think they're connected, and what do you think the central or main idea is of these photographs before we move on to trying to find the central idea of a section of the text? You can pause and you can think about it for a minute. So what we see here is someone texting, someone talking on the phone, and someone in a Google Meet. What idea is repeated there? If you said ways to communicate, you were correct. So the main idea or the central idea of these 3 photographs were there are many different ways to communicate. For example, you can text. Another example, you can talk on the phone. Another supporting detail, you can go on Google Meet. So these 3 things come together to help us form this central idea that there are many different ways to communicate. And that's what we're trying to do today with Timeless Thomas. We're trying to figure out what idea is repeated throughout the passage that the author is trying to really get us to understand. So one thing I like to think about when we look at a passage is we really have to look at the title, because the author picks the title for a really specific reason. So it says here, Timeless Thomas, How Thomas Edison Changed Our Lives. So when we think about the central or main idea, we think about the who and the what, and so what about them. So the who or the what is usually the topic. It's usually one word, 1 or 2 words. So if you were looking at this, the who or the what would be Thomas Edison. And now we have to think, so what about him? Is this just about his life? Is this just about his childhood? Is this about things that he's done? These are the things we have to think of. What does the author want us to learn about Thomas Edison? And we can use this part of the title to help us. How Thomas Edison Changed Our Lives. So we could put that in the so what. He changed our lives. And remember, this connects back to our focus question, which is what it takes to make a successful invention. And we know that Thomas Edison, he made many inventions if you look at the front page of the passage. And especially if you have read through the whole passage at least one time before we go into some close reading. Okay, so another thing that's also going to help you with the main idea besides the title and thinking about the who and the what and the so what is looking for repeated words or ideas. So what I noticed is throughout the entire passage, I noticed headings that kept saying present day Edison's lab, present day Edison's lab, present day Edison's lab. So to me, that makes me think that the author felt it was really, really important for the comparison of present day, which is now, and back then how Edison was inventing things. So that must be an important idea that the author was trying to get us to learn. And you notice that it was repeated many, many times, how we use things today and how he invented it then. So that also connects back to the who and the what and the so what, how he changed our lives. So what I'm going to do with you right now is I've pulled a section of the text and I've broken it apart into a main idea and 3 key details, or rather a central idea and 3 key details. So I'm going to read the paragraph to you, and we're going to try and figure out what is the big idea the author is trying to get us to learn here. One of Edison's biggest successes was his nickel iron storage battery. It was originally created to power an electric car, but since the electric car didn't catch on, he found many other important uses for it. For example, Edison's battery was used to power buoys, boats and submarines, local delivery trucks, roll homes, miner lamps, and railway cars and signals. So you have to say to yourself, look at the first sentence. One of Edison's biggest successes was his nickel iron storage battery. So think about what is the topic or the what of this paragraph. It would be his battery. So what about his battery? Well, it created many important uses. So we want to think about what would be the supporting details. So one of these is the main idea, or the central idea, and the other would be 3 supporting details. So was this whole paragraph just about his battery being used for powering miners' lamps? Was this whole paragraph about that one of his biggest successes was his nickel iron storage battery? Was this whole paragraph about his battery being used to power boats and submarines? Or was this whole paragraph about his battery being used to power railway cars and signals? So the repeated idea here was his battery was used to power things. His battery was used to power things. So I can tell that the main idea would be one of his biggest successes was his nickel iron storage battery, which happens to be the first sentence of the paragraph. And it's not always that way, but a lot of the time the authors tend to put the main idea of a new paragraph or the central idea of a new paragraph as the first sentence. And then these three items or these three sentences would be the supporting details. These all prove that his battery was important or successful. So now what I want you to do is I want you to take a look at these sentences that I've pulled out and paragraphs that I've pulled out. And I want you to really go back and look at the text, and I want you to think now about the main idea or the central idea of the whole passage. What did we learn about Thomas Edison? What was the big idea? So I want you to pause the video, take a look at these 4 pictures or 4 paragraphs. One of these is the central idea, and the other 3 would be the supporting details. I want to see if you can figure it out. So pause, and then I'll let you know if you were correct. So if you chose this order right here, you were correct. These 3 would have been the supporting details. Thomas Edison produced a light bulb that was perfect for home and offices. His tinfoil phonograph was the first device to record sound and play it back. And his fluoroscope was the first example of X-ray. So this is mentioning all of his first inventions and how are they important in use today. And that connects to the main idea of our quality of life has certainly been improved by the extraordinary work of Thomas Edison and his colleagues. So make sure that you always refer back to this anchor chart to help you figure out the different types of clues you can use to help you find the main idea or the central idea.